So our next speaker he was one of the first people ever to post on the RStan online help list user group list. Please, and if you don't know RStan, you should all know RStan. It's great for Bayesian computations. So please welcome another David. Come on down, David.
All right. Can you all hear me? Fantastic. All right. Yeah. Okay. I've had trouble with mics in the past. All right. Hey, everyone. I'm going to talk about data science and politics. Everybody loves politics. Oh, I just need to do the mouse thing. Okay. Fantastic. Do you want to click? No, I'll survive. I don't need a clicker. Simple man. Okay. All right. So first, who are we? So I am one of the co-founders of Blue Rose Research. We're a roughly 35-person shop founded by alumni of the Obama campaign. I have like a big wall of text up there, but I'd say that our main thing is that we're a data science focused firm trying to elect Democrats. We work with, I'd say most of the major spenders in the Democratic Party. We have over 100 clients in more than 3 countries. And our big thing is that we do very large numbers of surveys in order to test content and help politicians figure out, what to say. I'll go more into the details, but just to talk about some of the highlights, we've done literally thousands of experiments on millions of people. We've helped allocate hundreds of millions of dollars, and we've helped provide predictions across multiple cycles for nearly every election in the country. Okay, so just how do you actually do data science? Why is data science relevant for politics? I like to break things down in kind of a boring, unromantic way, which is that a lot of what political campaigns try to do is answer the questions of what do I say, what's happening, and how do I actually spend my money? How that translates, on a day-to-day basis can take a lot of forms. When you're deciding what to say, that could mean what ad should I put in the air, what talking points should I feed to the press, what policies should I base my campaign on, and we try to build tools to help people answer those questions. When it comes to what's happening, there's both how is the world around us changing and how is public opinion changing in response to events? And then there's also mechanically, okay, I have $500 million. How do I spend it across Senate races in order to maximize my expected Senate seats? And then when it comes to how to spend your money, it turns out, buying ads, which unfortunately is what most of TV political campaigns are, very complicated. And so just to talk a little bit about what we actually do on a day-to-day basis, I would say that big picture, we survey really large numbers of people. We join that information to a voter file. Generally, political campaigns in the US, though not in other countries, have access to a big creepy voter file of every person in the country and what elections they voted in and various things like that. And then we score, we fit models on the survey data, we score every person in the country, and then we do a bunch of analysis on the basis of that. So why is this hard? So the first thing is that politics has a lot of structure. And what that means in practice is that what makes people choose who to vote for is really a function of a really complicated interplay of factors like religiosity, education, socioeconomic status, and they're both, the relative weight of those things can change over time. It can change over space. There are some parts of the country where where a lot of these factors are more important than others, and the relative importance can change dramatically in response to world events. And then a lot of the things that we're trying to measure, or a lot of the things that drive voter behavior, are things that are psychometric quantities, which in some ways don't even exist. I think the hardest thing about this, the central problem in our field, is that survey takers are just really, really weird. And I'll talk about this more later. When I first started working in this space a bit over a decade ago, something like 1 in 10 people would answer phone surveys. That number is now down to 1 in 200 or 300. And so, at this point, the sheer act of answering a survey is a political act. I think my favorite statistic about, like if you look at people who answer phone surveys, even among the people who say they definitely will not vote, something like 80% of those people vote, just because, we're talking, you have to just be incredibly interested in politics in order to get people to answer these things. And they're also weirder in a bunch of other ways. It turns out, for example, that Jewish men are much more likely to answer surveys than other groups, which is unsurprising to me personally. But there's a whole host of other things like that make this hard. And then I think the other thing that's hard is, we fit all of these models, but I think in a lot of traditional business analytics, you're just trying to maximize, the AUC of your model, and you can say, well, we could make everything a lot more complicated, but then that would only increase the AUC of our models by like 0.01. So we're just going to save the tech debt. But what sucks about what we do is, we have this very spatially autocorrelated error, which is a fancy way of saying that we roll all of our stuff up to make decisions. And so, if there's hypothetically a quirk in southern Western Virginia where 70% of people are still registered Democrats, even though Biden got 20% of the vote, that's actually, true in West Virginia's 3rd congressional district. If that one edge case, less than 0.1% of the country lives there, but if it gives you a wrong forecast and you end up overspending in a district by millions of dollars, that's really bad. And so we have to end up making our models quite a bit more complicated than we otherwise would be. And then I think the other thing that sucks, just in the same vein, is that we really try to measure two things at our shop. One is changes in public opinion over time, and the other is changes in how people change their mind in response to seeing ads or arguments or content. And both of these things are incredibly small. The thing I like to say about this is that in 2012, Barack Obama got about 52% of the vote. And in 2016, Hillary Clinton got 51.1% of the two-party vote. So that's a 0.9% change over 4 years. But it made a big difference. So measuring small effects is in our case is important, which is a shame because measuring small effects is hard. All right, so how we actually deal with this, don't worry, I'm not going to actually read all of these things up here, but if folks want to. The first thing is that we just survey really large numbers of people. We did something like 15 million interviews in the 2022 cycle, and we're on track to do substantially more now. I think that we are one of the largest purchasers by volume of online survey data in the world, which I guess is cool. But that, as I think any statistician could tell you, that you can't actually solve all your problems by just surveying really large numbers of people. That's not a solution to bias. And so a really big thing is that we work with a lot of different panels to collect information from people who normally don't take surveys. My favorite example is one of our biggest panels. The way they get people is people are playing Candy Crush, they run out of lives, and then it's like, oh, would you like to take a survey in order to go? That does get to this trade-off, which I haven't seen too many survey people talk about, which is people always talk about data quality in surveys, getting high quality survey takers. And the problem that we found is that all of the really high quality panels are filled with people who are really weird. And so all of the shittier panels, kind of filled with the people who aren't paying attention, ththose people are a lot more normal. But then the data is less reliable. And so that creates a lot of hard trade-offs. The other thing we do is that we just use a lot more data. We join up to a lot more things. We have things like administrative data. We, traditional surveys only control for things like age and race and gender, and we control for literally dozens of different attitudinal characteristics. Because our whole philosophy is, given that survey takers are weird, our really only hope out is to just measure exactly how weird they are so that we can try to adjust for that. The other thing I'll say, just to talk a little bit, is, I don't think too many people here work on surveys, but we don't use any survey weights. I think I remember reading as a teenager, Andrew Gelman's would always say, you shouldn't use weights, you should just put everything into this one big model. And I always compare that to, when you're young, you read the Communist Manifesto and you're like, oh my God, this is beautiful, this is so exciting. And then you spend the next 10 years of your life trudging through Das Kapital and you're like, oh God, it's a lot harder than I thought it would be. But we've really tried to make the dream, Andrew Gelman's dream of fitting big multi-level models work. And I think we've made some progress. And then, the other big thing, and I think that there's probably some broader insight beyond politics and surveys, is that we do really extensive back testing and QC on all of our stuff. Every single time we make any change to our, at this point, very complicated process, we see how it would have affected all of our forecasts and hundreds of past races that we've pulled. And we end up finding that lots of seemingly minor changes that we do go back and break everything. And so it's a good thing to go and do that. So now I'm going to go through some graphs, which is fun. Because the whole thing is, because we have this whole workflow that allows us to score individual people, we can end up answering a lot of questions about politics that would be pretty hard. So this is an example where what we're showing, in every state, generally speaking, elections are different from year to year. And so, one example is that Democrats did worse in Florida in 2022 than they did in 2020. Even then, 2020 was a fairly bad year, but it got worse. And so it's a natural question that people argue about, which is like, how much of that was changes in who voted versus people actually changing their mind. And in Florida, we could see these two bars. It was a roughly even split of both, but it turns out that what was what really varied a lot by state. For example, in Pennsylvania, turnout was actually somewhat worse for Democrats, but people just really loved John Fetterman, and he just was in, and he was able to overcome that. And so this is the kind of thing that normally would be very hard to answer, but with modeling, you can go and do that. This is some more plots. This is just showing a reason why surveying has gotten a lot harder. Basically, one of the biggest drivers of answering surveys is this latent socioeconomic status. People, generally speaking, who are more educated really like taking surveys. It's kind of a form of self-expression for them. And the reason why that's now a problem is that in the past 8 years, or I guess in the past 10 years, there's been a really big realignment on education lines, where people who are very educated have become a lot more liberal, and people who are less educated have become a lot more conservative. And you could see that with these county scatter plots. And so then you could say, all right, well, great, let's just adjust for education. But it turns out that actually education is just symbolic of a whole host of differences that represent socioeconomic status. This is showing social trust. If you ask people, do you believe that people can generally be trusted? It turns out 70% of people say no, which is fun and probably somewhat concerning. But what you could also see from a measurement perspective is, like in 2016, the college whites who answered that they trust the people around them, or the non-college whites that did, swung toward Clinton. The ones that didn't swung toward Trump. And this was a big problem, because in 2016, the non-college whites who trusted the people around them were the only people who answered phone surveys, which is why the polls were wrong in 2016. Just to go through some more graphs, just to get at politics being complicated. This is just showing, two-way, support for the presidential candidate in 2016 by race, attitudes toward the Bible, and education, and then also showing ideology. And so you can see a bunch of things here that are, that are interesting. The non-additivity of these things. The first is, generally speaking, being more religious generally corresponds with being more Republican among white people, but among African Americans, religious African Americans are actually somewhat more Democratic than less religious ones. And the reason for that is a complicated interplay of history. Or another thing that's interesting is, when people talk about partisanship and ideology, they kind of use them as synonyms for each other. But it turned, this just kind of highlights, that they're really not the same thing. That if you look at ideology by race and education, by education and religiosity, it's really quite similar for African Americans and for white people, even though the partisanship is really quite different. And so that's kind of a big part of the job, is kind of moving between all of these things that seem similar but actually end up differing in a lot of very important circumstances. So when you actually go and do all this work, you end up with more important election forecasts, which is important for outcomes. we actually end up helping people, doing all this work allows us to help people understand what policies are popular and which ones aren't. I'm just going to talk about some parts of this graph because it's funny. So the basic idea here, we've pulled hundreds of different policies. So every single dot is a policy that, various people in the Democratic Party have proposed. And so the x-axis is the support among the overall population. And the y-axis is the support among 18 to 29-year-olds. I just want to pull out, so basically, the things that are below the line are things that are disproportionately unpopular with young people. The things above the line are popular with young people. And so you can see young people, they like student loan forgiveness, they like renewable energy. But then I think the funny one, it's labeled China technology, is actually banning TikTok. Young people don't want to do that, which I think is funny. But it also helps us know, what to tell the press. So, here we have a histogram of all of the different talking points that people have tested. We have several thousand in our library. It's available for free for anyone in the Democratic Party who wants it. And what you could see is that the best talking points really do a lot better than the worst talking points. And so it is actually important, to rank these things and try to say more of the good things and not the bad things. And just to close up, just about some of the big picture challenges. I think the biggest thing about in terms of how I think about my job is that politics is just a lot more decentralized than it used to be. And I think there are some aspects of this that are obvious, but others that I think are only clear if you're a practitioner. If you go back to the 2012 campaign, it used to really be that there was David Axelrod, and David Axelrod had a deputy named David Seamus, who was brilliant. And he just the two of them and together were just all right, this is what the campaign is going to be. And, they came up with these five proof points that were on the wall. And it was really creepy. Once you saw the proof points and you put on TV, you just heard them everywhere. It was because they went and they were able to kind of control the media environment. Now because basically the Democratic Party was the Obama campaign. Due to a variety of social and regulatory changes, one fun one is, Citizens United made it so that you can kind of donate infinite amounts to these non-party groups. That's led to this really giant transfer of staff and power away from these centralized campaigns toward now this decentralized network of literally thousands of different groups, which don't talk to each other, and in many cases are not legally allowed to talk to each other, and also don't like each other, as you may have heard about on the news. And so how do you get all of those different people to speak with one coherent message? That's a hard problem, but I think that I'm hopeful that technology can help. And then I think the other thing, and this is something that's probably more clear to people's lived experiences, is just that we used to live in a world where most people got their news from the nightly news. Maybe some people watched CNN. I guess people still read newspapers, but there weren't really that many of them. Now we live in a world where people really legitimately get large amounts of their news from things like TikTok. The White House now has to care about individual TikTok influencers in a way that just wasn't true before. And so there's just mechanically the problem of, if you have tens of thousands of people producing content that people are going to see, how do you measure that content? How do you create an accountability structure to push people toward making better content? How do you respond to stuff? It's all very hard. So, all right, that's the talk. Thanks for listening to all of this, and yeah.